What's better than finding a new fantasy anime that hooks you instantly? One that has many elements of the genre you've come to expect and cherish, while taking it in a different enough direction to keep you on your toes. Today, I'm going to talk about why Wistoria may be anime's next great fantasy, why it's a worthy DanMachi follow-up, and why you should be watching. Right off the bat, Wistoria is part Kaiju number 8, part MASH, with some Black Clover on the side, and written by the man who created the universally underrated DanMachi. The story follows Will Surfort, a mage in a magical school who, you guessed it, does not have magic, so he has to Rock Lee himself and work harder than everyone else to achieve his goal of reuniting with Elfie, a woman he grew up with, who was a magical prodigy and has ascended to the upper ranks of society as a Magia Vander. It's not the most original story, as I said, it's MASH and Kaiju number 8 pushed into one, and others have called it Black Clover with DanMachi's Dungeon. However, familiar can still feel fresh, and I'd say that's the case here. The main reason for that being the world doesn't feel like any of those shows I mentioned. It's far more visually appealing, and its lore gives it a very different feel despite the similarities it shares with other anime. One of the big reasons for that we learn early on is the Magia Vander, the magical elite, have created a magical barrier around the area to keep the sky intact. From the beginning of the show, the sky is literally falling. To me, that's awesome. While it starts with things we've seen before, twists like that make it different enough to be intriguing. That goes for the dungeon as well. Lots of times dungeons are used as the beginning for revenge arcs or fodder, except Goblin Slayer, which decided to go rated X on us. Here the dungeon is used for school purposes up to a certain level where monsters carry points you can score towards your grades. And beyond that, things get really dangerous. Again, familiar, but fresh. The show is aided greatly by stunning visuals. The mangaka really lucked out this time around because this looks so much better than DanMachi, and that's apparent from the get-go. It's so clean, so smooth, and really elevates everything you're watching. The world itself feels so cool and different from other settings in anime, and that mythological feel it has is one of the things I enjoy most about it. That extends to the action as well. The fights and characters look fantastic. This is one of the reasons why it has a chance to be one of the next great fantasy anime, but there are more. Something Wistoria leans on heavily is fleshing out their characters. Scion, Julius, and Wignall all get varying degrees of douchey introductions, and all grow more understandable as time goes on. I will say it does get kind of repetitive on that front, and while two of those work out really well, one does not. Will himself is kind of a mixed bag. He has plenty of cool and badass moments, but also can be really irritating at times. The passiveness and brushing certain things off goes too far to me, but we're early in the series. Bell wasn't amazing early on either. Will's roommate is particularly interesting. We don't know much about him, but we see there is something going on there that makes you wonder what secrets he's hiding. Also, his competitive lover vibes are a really funny bit of levity that added a considerable amount of entertainment for me, especially when he triggered Colette's jealousy. It's funny that this is written by the DanMachi guy because that makes so much sense in hindsight. Obviously, the dungeon system shares similarities, but what really sold it was the final arc of the season. The best season of DanMachi is Season 4, one where the lead and another character are trapped together in the dungeon for an extended period of time and grow closer. That's exactly what happens here in Wistoria with Will and Wignall, and once again, it works brilliantly. If you took DanMachi, turned the fan service way down, the animation way up, and set things in an equally interesting world with inspiration from other anime, you get Wistoria. In that regard, this is a worthy successor. The praxis as a whole was great. Seeing these powerful students struggle and put aside their differences to achieve a common goal was really well executed, especially when we tease some characters' real strength and their potential. The little we've seen of the villains so far has also been something I can't wait to see explored further. I particularly enjoyed the inclusion of Finn at the end of the season, who looks familiar, and the insinuation that he brings. Everything I thought I knew about the series is kind of in doubt now, and I can't wait to see what comes of that in Season 2. This is primarily where I think this could be a new great fantasy. It's had an excellent start, but there are some really interesting concepts we could touch on that excite me for its future. If you aren't watching now, I think you'll want to as things play out, because this is only scratching the surface. As far as issues are concerned, I really only have a few. I touched on the repetitiveness of certain characters' arrogance, and it's important that always feels earned, which it didn't for one. It'd be nice to dive deeper into Will, because as far as main characters go, he's pretty far down the list in terms of entertainment. Lastly, this had to have set the record for the fastest tournament arc in history. We start a tourney less than halfway through the season, and before 2/3 of the season are up, it's over. That's the most disappointing element of the season, to be honest. The setup was great. There are individually fantastic moments, great action set pieces, and character moments, but it all felt so rushed. It easily could have been twice as long and would have likely been twice as good. But I digress. With that, I'm out.